we can pass on that. Is your, are you on? Okay. Am I on? Okay. Now we're too loud. Okay. So before we get into the fireside chat, I do want to apologize for the technical issues today. Apparently, some fuse popped in another part of the building, which is why we lost the PA, and a lot of other things sort of cascaded from that. But we are back in business, at least for the time being. So we'll roll through and hope it doesn't happen again. But it's been a long day, but I think it's been a very productive day. And I wanted to use this opportunity to kind of reflect on what we heard today. And I want to start with, I actually want to start with something that Peter said during his presentation, and he asked, who was that person that got you involved, that really motivated you? And I think you've heard me say this before. You certainly, if you were here this morning, you heard me say this. I became the president and CEO in September of 2014, and my very first trip out of the office as the CEO was to Meridian just a couple of months later. And I had a really lovely lunch just up the street with Mr. Gill, with Gil Carmichael. He was a fairly inspirational person, and I can certainly point to him as a kind of an initial inspiration for me to keep moving. And the fact that his acolytes, if you will, were able to sort of pick me up and help me start down this journey, that just tells you what happens when a man can leave a legacy that ripples through well after he's gone. He helped me on the rail side and on the vision side and on kind of understanding communities, but he actually did a lot more for this community than rail or even the highways. And I know Paul knows a little something about that. I'm going to ask you very, very quickly to share that with us, and then we'll pick up the fireside chat.
I appreciate it, Jim. So, Peter, when you talked about who got you involved initially, I can tell you right now it was David Stockman in 1981 when he threatened the long-distance network. That's when I got involved as a kid who liked trains. But where I really got involved in the idea of passenger rail advocacy was in 2007. And that's when I went to the Carmichael Conference in St. Louis. And that's where I met two of my mentors and later friends, Mr. Gill and Mayor John Robert Smith. And there, in that meeting, I found a politic where I remember Mayor Smith, you talked to Governor Dukakis as your favorite Democrat, and he referred to you as his favorite Republican. And I found a spirit of working across the aisle on things that we share in bringing people together as opposed to their differences. That was what got me back involved in this one. I'll tell you that Betsy and I were the beneficiaries of your mentorship and friendship, and Mr. Gill's too. I was proud that Mr. Gill wrote Betsy a letter of recommendation for grad school to Texas A&M. As I dig in, though, I realize that Mr. Gill, I remember him in the 1970s as a little kid when he ran for governor. And this was coming off a very turbulent 50s and 60s for my home state with a lot of ugly politics. And what I learned about Mr. Gill, talking with him and from Mayor Smith, is he did an awful lot more for our nation and our state than just champion intermodal transportation, but really moved our state forward in a way that I can't imagine in my lifetime. Mayor Smith, I know you were a witness to and beneficiary of much of that, as all of us have been in Mississippi. And I'd like, if I could, to have you share a few words or thoughts about that, Mr. Gill, that probably most folks in this room don't know. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Paul. I knew Gil all of my formative years growing up here in Meridian, Mississippi. He was a car dealer. He was at the Episcopal Church and a strong force there. White-haired at a very early age. A true Southern gentleman in all of the good connotations that we use around that term. Now, at that time, all of the hierarchy in Meridian were, and not in Meridian, in Mississippi, were Democrats. Legislature fully controlled, governor, lieutenant governor, every office you could name. Republicans were a new thing in Mississippi at that time. And of course, at that time, it was Republicans believed in science. We stayed out of folks' bedrooms, didn't care what happened there, it wasn't our business. And as Mississippians, realizing that our state is roughly 50-50, African American and white, we had to learn to get through this difficult period together. We had to realize that we had to care about each other through desegregation and do it as peacefully and lovingly as we possibly could. And that's what Gil exemplified, and that's what drew me into the Republican Party. That we could plan and invest together, black and white, for a future that would be shared by our children, black and white. And I think Mississippi in many ways deserves a lot of credit. This isn't theoretical for us. This is daily for us. Our lives touch daily. We have to make it work. And Gil was a large part of making that transition so that Mississippians could begin to think collectively rather than as totally divided. I'll tell you a little funny story. I ran when I was running for the city council, and I'll tell you how I got drawn in to do that. But I was a single parent. I was 40 years old, single parent. My son was 7 and my little girl was 5 years old. And we did a door-to-door campaign within the ward that I would hopefully represent. And the children would go with me, because I'm a single parent, I didn't have anything else to do with them. So they went door-to-door with me on their bicycles. And I told them before we left the house, I said, now I'm running as a Republican, and not everyone we meet will be a Republican. We'll meet a lot of Democrats. But, you know, we're going to try to win them over on the message that we're carrying forward. So we had a really good afternoon of positive response when I would lay out what I hoped to accomplish on the city council. And there was an elderly white gentleman sitting on his front porch, and I walked up, the children pedaled up, and they were so encouraged by what they had been hearing from people that we talked to. And so I laid out to him what my plans were on the city council to improve Meridian and set a course for our children and grandchildren. And he said, son, I like everything you said. I'm all for you, going to vote for me. He said, you are running on the Democrat ticket, aren't you? And I said, well, no, sir, I'll be on the Republican ticket. And his face got red and the veins bulged out in his neck. And he said, son, I'd vote for Satan himself as a Democrat. Well, the children were crestfallen, and as they pedaled off with me, my daughter pedaled up to me, and she said, Daddy, you didn't tell me the devil was a Democrat too?
How am I supposed to top that? Oh my word! But see, this is one of to spend time with John Robert. There's always a great story, and Meridian has a great story. And I think we have spent almost the entire day telling Meridian's great story. So, from your point of view, what did you hear today? When we started with our mayors, I kind of moved through the food and beverage, and of course the Amtrak presentations, the long distance. What would you take away from today?
It's not about moving rail equipment. It's not about steel rails or steel wheels. It's about human beings. Sometimes I think we forget at the various levels of government that this isn't about a particular contraption on rails that we're investing in. We're investing in the people that use that choice of transportation. And they're as different as this country is made up of different people. You heard it from the mayors, champions, 3 champions, but they represent many other champions out there. When I was on the Amtrak Board of Directors, we created the Amtrak Mayors Advisory Council. Amtrak has almost 500 mayors out there. Those are powerful advocates if you work with them and provide them with a little attention. They'll go to bat for you. And let me tell you, it's a small city. When I was working it, you didn't see the mayor of Chicago walking up and down the aisles of Congress about passenger rail, but you saw the mayor of Whitefish, Montana. Those are the voices that move votes on Capitol Hill. So you've heard from the champions who are putting up their money, putting their political lives on the line for something they believe in, which is not just nostalgia or adoration for Amtrak as a company. It's about a choice for people to move to health care, to education, to visit their families. It's about connectivity that we need, and the highway doesn't answer all of our needs. So you heard that first. Then as we talk about food service, again, it's about the human experience. We're feeding human beings. They deserve food that is healthy, that is not loaded with sodium. And the people east of the Mississippi River deserve just as fresh a meal as the people west of the Mississippi.
Yes, they do.
And it doesn't matter how long I'm on the train. If I'm on the train during mealtime, then I deserve a healthy meal. And this isn't something we hadn't done before, let me tell you. We certainly, that was the way it was when I was on the board. And it was supported by those representing the Northeast as well as other parts of the country as board members. We spoke together as one. On the long distance analysis, you heard of the dreams and aspirations of people across this country wanting to be connected. Not all dreams can be fulfilled, but the bulk of those are within reason if this country is determined to have that choice. See, I don't think the money within IIJA, the $66 billion to $100 billion, I don't think that should be the ceiling. That should be the floor of investment in passenger rail in this country, because we have decades and decades to recover from of absolute neglect. When I was appointed to the Amtrak Board of Directors, we were literally spending more collecting the roadkill off of the nation's highways than we were spending on the entire passenger rail system. That is inexcusable for the greatest industrial power and the greatest economy in the world. Inexcusable.
So I have to say, I heard that as well. I also heard, I've written about this a lot. We've started to set out a vision, and Sean can vouch for me on this. We spent many, many, many hours on Zoom with House T&I committee staff, talking about the dollars, talking about how it's allocated, talking about what the right way might be to go forward. And I don't think anybody in our conversations thought that this was it, that this was all there was going to be. This was, at least from my experience of our meetings, this was a down payment on the future. This was a down payment on moving us forward. But it was also a down payment on getting some quick wins. It is a little disheartening to believe that with at least now it's $70 billion after the last couple of cycles, with at least $70 billion in the bank, that we can't at least get started on some of the vision in that long distance map. Doesn't mean we can finish it, doesn't mean we can build out the map, doesn't mean it can happen quickly, but we have to be able to do something with that money other than study, other than plan, and other than buy long distance equipment. We have to do better. We have to dream bigger. And, you know, there was a time when we all as a nation dreamt bigger. And when we decided it was important, we put money and resources and talent and commitment behind it, and we got it done. I love to talk about the Apollo landing because that was right in the middle of my childhood. And I remember being blown away when Neil Armstrong's boot hit the moon. And when you realize that that was just somebody's idea 8 years, 9 months, and 26 days earlier. Think about that. Entirely new categories of science and engineering had to be invented to make that happen. But we thought it was important. As a nation, we thought it was important, so we did it. And I was at a high-speed rail conference in DC not too long ago, where an official who, I will not embarrass him in public, but he was very proudly talking about how his project was approved by the voters and they could start construction in 2063. Where are we? We have an incredible vision here on this map. And I think our job, and I think what we heard from the mayors earlier, our job, and as Frank said, for that matter, their job is to hand out the money. The mayor's job is to ask for it. Our job is to help the mayors make that ask and understand what and how to ask. And that was certainly what I heard today, that we are on the cusp of a revolution. We are right at the beginning of what could be a remarkable period of expansion in passenger rail if we remain committed, if we don't take our eye off the ball, if we don't sit back and say, oh, well, you know, we got the Jobs Act. Whew, that was tough. We are 2.5 years into this process. It's a 5-year bill. When we were looking at the reauthorization of the FAST Act, which is what the bipartisan infrastructure law eventually was, Sean and I started sitting down talking about strategy for FAST Act reauthorization 3.5 years before it was due to expire. On that timeline, we're already late. So now is the time for us to stay energized and maybe even energize a little more. And certainly what I got out of today, I felt a lot of energy in this room. I certainly felt it from the mayors. I felt it from Mayor Ellis. I felt it from Mayor McAdams. I felt it from Mayor Gibson. We all want this to happen, but it's up to us to make it happen. And I think we leave here with a charge to make it happen. And it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think we have to rededicate ourselves to that mission. Having won the victory of the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's just a down payment, that's just the start. And I think what I'm walking out of here with is a new energy and a new resolve to go into the next cycle and continue these wins and continue to fund the vision so that we can really have the service that we deserve. Gentleman member?
And you never give up. Let me tell you about Union Station. So Gil Carmichael gave us, the city, a $35,000 grant to do a feasibility analysis for a multimodal transportation center. Now, no one in Meridian, Mississippi ever heard of a multimodal transportation facility. They called, and Maureen, who worked with me for 16 years and was an equal part of everything we did good here, is sitting over there. She knows this is true. And through a laborious process, especially with the city council at that time, which I told you before was a greatly divided city council. But we finally got our vote through to begin construction on Union Station, which the city has $1.3 million in it. It's an $8 million facility. Midway through, Amtrak calls to tell me they have cut service south of Atlanta. Well, there goes my biggest mode of transportation. So I organized the mayors from New Orleans to Atlanta, and we went to Capitol Hill, and we visited all of our delegations saying, this is what Amtrak has chosen to do, and this will cut us off from the rest of the nation unless you have an automobile or can afford an airplane ticket, you're cut off. So after we left, and Tom Downs and Trent Lott told me this story. Tom Downs was president of Amtrak at the time, and he got a call from Trent Lott, who was not majority leader at the time, but he was on the Commerce Committee. And Trent said, Tom, this is Trent. I didn't know I cared about Amtrak, but apparently I do. What do we need to do? So, took Trent on board the Crescent, and we walked through the car, and he saw the disabled vets that were able to travel in a dignified way on that train. He saw the single mothers with little children going to visit their grandmothers, and the only way they could afford to get there was that train. He talked to the elderly couples that had worked hard all of their lives and wanted to see the nation, but didn't want to battle the interstate. And then the last car, I didn't pick just any train. The last car, and this was when Amtrak did these things, put on a car to take the children from all over Mississippi that were going to compete in the Special Olympics in Washington, D.C. And the only way they could get there, because they have special needs, was on that train and in that car. And after he visited with all of these assorted Mississippians on board, and as we turned to walk away, I said, now, Senator, do we tell them that this nation can't afford this train? I had my chance. And he and Frank Lautenberg, liberal Democrat from New Jersey, the two of them saved passenger rail in this country. And it was saved again by Cory Booker and Roger Wicker. Again, liberal Democrat from New Jersey, conservative Republican from Mississippi. And then as Senator Booker moved on to other things, it was principally Senator Roger Wicker from Mississippi, who became a believer in it because he saw the impact to human beings. It's a moving story because it involves humans.
It does.
So we realized, the bottom line was, I realized I couldn't solve the problems just for Union Station. I had to get Amtrak back to that station we were in the midst of building. But I realized it had to be solved at a national level. There had to be more cities than Meridian caring about it to force a change within Congress. And that and those mayors who became the Mayor's Advisory Council made a terrific difference. And at Amtrak headquarters, Tom Downs put up a banner saying, it's Meridian, stupid. Meaning it's smaller cities that are going to have the impact within Congress for passenger rail, and it is still true.
So what I take from that, thank you. Would it be fair to describe this as it takes a community to build community? It takes these communities of mayors stitched together in a coalition to make the case, and that's probably the most important thing we as advocates can do, is to be that glue to pull those communities together, help them see that they have common goals and common aspirations, common needs.
It takes listening. It takes mayors listening one to another who are on a card about how they can each support each other and how their needs can be met through a shared vision. It's about listening, having members of Congress listen to people who are impacted. It's Amtrak going out and listening to the people that they serve. And I have been so pleased to see that happening now.
Agreed.
You cannot help but be moved if you go listen to people and listen with a discerning ear. Listen not to say no, but listen to find yes.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That was one of the things that I found very inspirational about going to the long distance workshops. Amtrak, more often than not, it was Larry. But sometimes it was Larry by himself. Sometimes it was Larry plus Nicole. There was always an Amtrak contingent. And it had been a long time since I had heard that kind of enthusiasm and excitement for doing something new, for growing, not cutting, for actually having a vision to build a new map and to expand service and not just find a way to cut it back. And I think, I don't want to speak for Larry, but certainly I think the message that I got at all of those workshops from all the folks who attended, I'm remembering the Boise workshop, Senator Crapo's office, boy, they were adamant. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? He fully expected to walk out of that room with a plan, and I think was slightly frustrated that he didn't do that. And I'm hearing that message elsewhere too. I was in Toledo 2 weeks ago with Congresswoman Capter, and her message to Amit and to Stephen was sitting on this side, Amit was sitting on this side. She spent the better part of 2 hours saying in one way or another, what are we waiting for? Let's do this. And again, to their credit, they sat, they listened, they took copious notes. They are in listening mode, and they made the effort to be there and to hear. So I'm very encouraged by that, and I want to see that continue. And I'll keep an eye on it to see that it does. I'm sure you will too.
I want to certainly make a point about Knox Ross and his colleagues on the Southern Rail Commission. They've been at this hard at it for at least 10 years. And they don't get paid a dime. Yet they're in Washington, they're telling their stories, they're taking advice, they're working in very conservative states to deliver the money that is necessary for both capital and operating. And you've got to be you have got to exhibit that kind of dedication. It is not what's in it for you, it's what's in it for the people that you either serve, know, or will pass this generation on to the next. That's got to be how much you care, and you've got to have a vision that is far longer than your involvement. I want you to pick a point on the horizon line that you care about, but you probably won't occupy. And for me, that point on the horizon line I care about that I know I will not occupy is reflected in the eyes of my 4 grandsons. Because the decisions we make today about how we're connected as a people and a country and how we move and how we plan our development, we either get those right today and they can continue to live in smaller cities in Mississippi or Vermont or Colorado or Idaho, or they will have to move to another part of the country. We're creating their opportunity to succeed by what we do today. And you've got to care about it whether you ever have that connectivity or not, because you're laying their future and their groundwork.
Amen. I can only add one thing to that. What am I supposed to use this now?
It's for you online.
Okay. I can only add one more thing to that, which is that I hope it is for our grandchildren and not for my grandchildren's grandchildren. Do you have any closing thoughts? I don't. I think that was the best way to leave this room.
Well, yeah, I actually have a closing thought. I actually do have a closing thought based on your comment about I hope it's not for the grandchildren of my grandchildren. But I would say that's got to be the level of commitment for that future. And there's a snatch of poetry from a poet named Vachel Lindsay, and he was writing about his hometown of Springfield, Illinois. And I think it captures this sense of continuity of commitment. Right? Recorded grandson of your son. A city is not built in a day. Our little town cannot complete her soul till countless generations pass away. We must have Lincoln-hearted men, for a city is not built in a day. And they must come and go and do their work while countless generations pass away. Your job is to be that Lincoln-hearted man and woman for the future of the grandsons of your sons and daughters.
If you can't leave this room and do this job after hearing that, you must not have a pulse. John Robert, thank you as always.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you so much. For all of your help today, I'd like just to present a little token.
Thank you.
And I guess this is it, but I want to thank John Robert, want to thank our mayors, want to thank our sponsors. We've had a wealth of sponsors, a local business community here. I'd really urge all of you, as you're putting your things away, to recognize how much of this was possible because we had generous sponsors from the business community here who agreed to support this meeting. We owe them our thanks and a round of applause. And I'm going to give it to Johnsy for some housekeeping.
So as you go out, please remember to take one of the A and B electric cups if you have not. If you want an extra bag, let me know. We have some. They're fabulous. So please consider taking one or two home with you. And if you will look at this sign over here, we have the dates for RailNation DC, March 16th through March 20th. Registration will be up in the next couple of weeks. So thank you.